So again, the talk is about this tool that I've spent a little bit of time working on at Stitch Fix called Morticia. It's just for visualizing and debugging complex Spark workflows. Just to preface, like most of the talk is about sort of a structural problem with respect to people and not super technical, because it's really a scaling of people problem that I'm addressing and not like a data scaling problem. So it's going to be less technical. So the first thing I want to go over is who am I? I'm currently at Stitch Fix. I'm a data platform engineer there. Before that, I was at Netflix, and I was working on their big data platform. So working with Apache Pig and Hadoop on top of EMR, and especially working with Lipstick. I don't know if anybody uses Apache Pig anymore now that people are using Spark, but Lipstick is a visualization tool for Pig and Pig query plans. And so the team that I'm on currently at Stitch Fix is about developer enablement, and really it's about it's a platform for developer enablement, right? So the main problem that we have, and right, what I talk about a structural people problem, is that we have like 70 or so data scientists and algorithm developers. So these people are like domain experts, right? There's tons of them. There's more of them than we have engineers. And that's a problem because they're not engineers, right? And that might be a little bit contentious, but they're not engineers. And I'm going to say that again, they're not engineers. And so it's really important to provide a platform that gives them the ability to get work done. And so the whole point of a developer enablement platform is to be a multiplier to the data scientists and the algorithm developers. So that's really our raison d'etre. And again, one of the things I do really want to say is that we're not ETL engineers. I know that a lot of people in the audience, and especially people coming to Spark Summit, are ETL engineers. Like they're going to write ETL. They're going to, data scientists are going to come to them. They're going to say, hey, I've got this thing. I need to make sure that it scales and that it's working on this volume of data. Here you go. I don't really know how to make it work, right? And the reason that we build this platform is to make those people obsolete, right? Is we're not ETL engineers, and we don't really believe in ETL engineers. And so what is Morticia and how does that fit in? So with this developer enablement platform, some of the things that we really focus on are like things like self-service, right? The data scientists should be enabled to go to this platform and just take action, right? They shouldn't have to come and talk to me. They shouldn't have to come and talk to any platform engineer to get work done. They should be able to just do work. Also to provide things like visibility, like, well, what's going on and how can I dig in and actually understand what's happening? And Morticia provides that for Spark. So you might ask, well, why bother, right? There's a lot of stuff out there already that does this. There is the Spark UI. There's other tools that you may have seen. And the thing that I want to emphasize and say like 100 times, but don't have time to say 100 times, is that data scientists are not going to become Spark experts, right? Data scientists are not going to become Spark experts, and nor should they, right? So maybe one or two of them are going to build a good understanding of Spark, and they're going to go down that road. But that's not really what you're paying the data scientists for. They should be doing science, right? They shouldn't be wrestling with this complex technology that has rough edges, is hard to work with. All of your stuff is all over the place, and like they should be building models. They should be working with data. They shouldn't be playing with Spark. That might be a little bit contentious again. And so where I want to go from here is like the current state of the universe. And to do that, I want to look at a very simple query and then kind of ask some questions about it and go through what does it look like using existing tools to understand this simple query, and then compare that to how Morticia helps to do the same thing. So this is a super simple query. I'm just doing a count of a distinct from some source of data. So again, this is with Spark SQL. I should have mentioned that early on. And it's just a distinct from this table with a count and then a filter, right? So it should be really easy to see how that maps. And So the questions that I have are just these 4 things. How many input records do I have? Something that seems really trivial, like I'm reading from some source of data. I want to know how many actual records am I reading. Should be really easy to answer, something that data scientists would want to know. And then the second thing is, what is the parallelism throughout? So suppose my job gets broken up into stages. I know that it gets broken into stages because of some information I have about Spark from somewhere else. Well, for each stage, what is the parallelism? Like, is it going to be easy for me to understand that? Again, I'm a data scientist. I'm just trying to answer some question with a simple query, but I want to know, okay, well, my data's pretty big. What does the parallelism look like? And then third, and this is a little bit subtle, and that is, how did the query that I wrote get mapped to actual work, right? So I wrote some blob of SQL. Well, okay, what parts of that query actually triggered this breaking up into multiple stages, right? That might be very difficult to understand with Spark SQL. If I'm just using the data frames, or sorry, the RDD syntax, it's really straightforward. Like I can see, okay, this RDD, here's a stage, here's another RDD. But when I have Spark SQL, that's not straightforward at all. And so I might have things in my query that I shouldn't have, right? But I don't know that because I want to answer this question. And then the last thing is logs, right? Suppose I'm running on Yarn, suppose I'm running somewhere else. How do I actually get to the logs? So I want to try to answer those 4 questions with the existing tools. So the first thing that you might, once you launch your job, you're going to dig through the logs and you're going to say, okay, well, oh look, there's a link to the Spark UI. Okay, I'm going to find that, and I'm going to go to it, and I make sure that, if I'm on EMR, I'm going to set up my proxy, make sure I can actually get to it. Then I'm going to come to this page, and I see that here's my job that's running. Fantastic. But no, how do I find the input records? I don't see it here on this page. So I'm going to look around a little bit. I'm going to say, oh, well, looks like I can click on that description link. Go ahead and do that. And I'm going to get brought to this page. And I'm saying, okay, well, this is my job. This is what my query launched. But where's the input records? I don't really see it here. I see a lot of other things here, but I don't see input records. So I'm going to say, well, stage 0 looks like that's probably my input stage. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And when I do, I'm going to say, oh, okay, here's this huge page full of information. There's a lot of stuff on here. But up in the top left corner, I do see that there is, in fact, an input record count, right? It looks like a little bit over 1 million records. So after clicking through 3 pages and digging around, I finally see, oh, okay, that's how much data I read. Not great. And then the second question is, well, what's the parallelism throughout, right? So for each of those stages, so say, broke into 2 stages in this case, what is the parallelism? The only way for me to find that is to go back to the previous page, click on it, and see the number of tasks. Right now, this is 12 tasks, so it's pretty easy. I can just go through and I can count, okay, it looks like it's 12, right? But when you have really complex jobs and tons of things going on, this might be hundreds of things long, so you're not really going to know the parallelism. And then for the second stage, it looks like it's just 1 task. Other questions I might want to ask is why? And then this is the subtle question, and this is what I really spent a lot of time working on Morticia to try to answer. And that is, okay, I have this SQL query. How did that SQL query get mapped to the actual work that took place? And right now, if you click on the SQL tab of the Spark UI, this is what you're going to get, right? It's this kind of hideous, difficult to see, difficult to understand text printout of the logical plan, the analyzed logical plan, the physical plan, and then it looks like I can't even read what that is because it's so small. Right, so, but it isn't helpful because it doesn't map to the stages. So I don't know, oh, I wrote this part of this, the distinct count. Is that what triggered it splitting into 2 stages? I have no way of knowing. So that's why I have a there, because there's no way for me to really tell. And then lastly, logs. The Spark UI doesn't really give me any access to logs, so I don't really have any way to find them unless I know something about the platform that I'm running on. And again, if you're really familiar with Spark and you're really familiar with Hadoop and you're used to dealing with really cumbersome technology, it's like, whatever, I'll figure out how to get to it. I'm going to find the Yarn resource manager. I'm going to scroll through and I'm going to click and I'm going to find my job and I'm going to look at the logs. But if you're a data scientist and you're just trying to build a model, you're just trying to get some data and do something simple or just run a simple query, like this really, really, really sucks. So I want to talk a little bit about Morticia and how Morticia addresses this problem. So some of the things that Morticia does provide is that it's interactive and it provides a coherent, unified view. So a lot of this information, which I think seems really simple and is really simple to find once you're really familiar with it, I want to take that information and present it in a way that is right where you sort of intuitively expect it to be. And then the second thing, and this is the big one, is logical information. I want to actually understand, okay, I said a distinct in my query. Like, how did that actually, how does that show up on there? And then there's status, which, again, you can get that from the Spark UI. And then there's archival, right? So unless you configure a history server for Spark, once you run your job and the job finishes and the Spark context shuts down, the Spark UI goes away. That kind of sucks, right? I don't get to see the DAG visualization. I don't get to see the metrics. I don't get to see any of that information once the Spark context goes away. With Morticia, it sticks around. So with Morticia, I want to try to answer the same questions. So when you first go to Morticia, this is the page that you're presented with. Anyone that's familiar with Lipstick, if you've used Pig before and you've used Netflix's Lipstick, this is suspiciously similar to that. So some of the things that are particularly interesting is that you see the user that launched the Spark context, you see the name of the Spark context, and other interesting information like the progress. And so I can find my job by putting in my username or the name of my job and doing a search. Go ahead and click on it, and when I do, this is what I see, right? So what's interesting here is that you see, like, this is sort of the bird's eye view of your job, right? It looks like it got broken into 2 stages. That's what these light blue boxes are. There's some logical nodes inside of those stages, and there's some RDD nodes which are not attached to logical information. There's links to the Spark UI and links to the logs, kind of important. You've got status information. And then what you'll notice is that it's interactive. So if you can zoom in on that graph, and I can say, okay, well, look, I've got this metastore relation, and that metastore relation, so that's where I'm reading my data from. It's got a schema attached to it, super useful. And look, there's the input record count, right? Attached, coming out of the metastore relation. I'm reading that many records from the data source. Pretty easy for someone like a data scientist to understand. The next thing is that when I click on those stages, I get brought, like on the left-hand side, it pops up all the information about that stage. This is all information that's, again, available in the Spark UI. You've got to dig around a little bit to find it. But if you look at the bottom, you'll see that the number of tasks for that first stage that I click on is 12. Pretty easy to answer the parallelism question. Same thing for the second stage. The number of tasks is 1. And then again, when I want to understand how my job got broken into stages based on the logical stuff that I wrote, I can look at the actual structure of the graph. And what you'll notice is that you see these two, it's called the same thing. So it's group by star and group by star in the first stage and in the second stage. That's still a little bit difficult to understand, but if you understand what a group by star is actually going to be, that's your distinct. So you would know that because that's split across the 2 stages, that's the thing that triggered it getting split into 2 stages, right? That's the thing that triggered the reduce in this sort of map reduce concept. And in the current state of the universe, you don't really have a way to answer that. You have to just know that. And so then this is a GIF of it actually in action. It is deployed. We do use it at Stitch Fix. So the way that you would find your job is I'm just going to enter my username. I'm going to search, click on it, go through. You see that it's pretty responsive. I can click on these links. I can get to those individual pages. It's pretty helpful. I can go back. I look at the logs. And we're using Yarn on top of EMR at Stitch Fix. I can move the graph around, zoom in. It's pretty, again, I think it's a pretty intuitive interface. It's got a lot of work that still needs to be done. And you'll notice that because the mapping from logical node to RDD is not one-to-one, as you probably expect, and what is why this doesn't exist yet, when you click on one of those nodes, you see the RDDs that map to it, and you can expand and look at the information about those RDDs. And this is an actual real query that we run at Stitch Fix. So it does get rather complicated. I don't even want to imagine trying to debug this with the Spark UI. And so then the last question is, well, how? And there's two major components, right? So there's the Spark listener, which is the thing that gets all the information that the current Spark UI has, right? So this is where the metrics are coming from. This is where the stage information is coming from. The RDD graph is coming from. All of that's coming from this existing public interface. So anybody could implement that. Anybody could do their own Spark UI that looks exactly like the current Spark UI. But then in order to get the logical information, that's where I'm using AspectJ point cuts. So every time a logical plan.plan gets called, I'm capturing that. Every single time that the physical plan gets called and executed and generates an RDD graph, I'm capturing that. And so I'm building this somewhat brittle mapping from a logical node to RDD, and that's what gets displayed with in Morticia. And then the server, the front end, is I took Lipstick and I just rewrote it to take the same. So basically, this is a client that's running inside of your Spark context. It generates a JSON blob and posts it to the server. And I guess I want to finish that part with please help. Like that mapping is really brittle. I'm using what I feel like is a little bit of a non-standard method to get in there and actually access that information. There's all kinds of issues with it, and the mapping is super, super brittle. It's not one-to-one, as you would expect. So having some kind of public interface for getting access to that information, even if it's just getting access to the plan at certain points and knowing, hey, and actually having like the nodes in the graph, right? I know this is like a little bit different than the way that you want to do it with Scala, but like having the nodes have actual unique IDs, for example, would be a huge help. And then the last thing is, well, why Morticia? And I personally think that Morticia Atoms from the Atoms family is inspiring and powerful. Initially, when I first started writing it, it was a tool just for postmortem analysis, so there was no status information. So postmortem, Morticia. And then I personally think, and again, if you love Java and you love AspectJ, you may disagree with me, but I personally think that AspectJ is kind of like witchcraft, and Morticia is a witch. And the last thing is that amidst all the chaos and complexity of our family and what's going on, Morticia is incisive and calm, and I feel this tool helps to be incisive and calm in the chaos and complexity of the Spark universe. So that's it.
Cool. So thanks very much for this awesome presentation. We've got a few minutes, so if you've got any questions, please raise your hand, and I will run down to you so you can ask them.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I just wanted to know if you have any plans to publish this as open source.
Yes. In fact, I would very much like to do that. It's timing. So right now, it's a little bit coupled with our infrastructure, especially in terms of deploying it. And so there is going to be an effort to make it open source, because there's no reason that it shouldn't be, and I strongly disagree with some of the companies that are trying to make this specific thing or this concept like its own company. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? All right. Oh, sure. Okay. And then I'll go to you guys. Go for it.
Hi. I was wondering if you have any plan to add anything regarding of the memory footprint to this task and job, how these tasks consume memory, because that's one of the other biggest problem in debugging of the Spark job when you get things like out of memory exception, or you just want to know what operation use what kind of memory and how much memory has been used.
Yeah, so there's a lot of information that is available currently that just isn't in there because I haven't had time to throw it in there. What you will notice is that as you click on the logical nodes and you see the individual RDDs, it has all of the information that is currently given to you by the Spark listener, but there's actually tons of additional information in there, and so some of that work means working with the Spark community to put more information in there and to make these interfaces a little bit more useful.
Cool. Okay. Thanks.
So did you have some experience with visualizing large jobs with like 20 or 50 stages, and how well does it handle that?
Yes, so one of the previous slides, a lot of the, so one of the things that we experience at Stitch Fix is that with data scientists, their favorite thing to do ever is to write giant SQL queries and just expect that to magically run, and they throw that over the fence, right? And so this is one such thing. And so you'll see that like these like pink nodes on here, the pink stages are ones that didn't even execute, right? So they were like submitted and then they didn't finish. And this is actually, I would say, on the medium size. And so one of the things that I do when somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, my job isn't working, it's not running, help, is I say, well, okay, well, show me the Morticia graph. And if the Morticia graph doesn't load, so this is using like client-side graph visualization, a JavaScript library called Dagger. And if it doesn't visualize because it's too big, I say, okay, can you just break your query up into like 2 or 3 parts and then let's talk, because there's a certain point at which it does become kind of impossible to debug.
I just wanted to tell you that the Spark UI does have the number of tasks as well as the links to the log. It depends on which version of Spark you're using, obviously, but they're there. And I would encourage you to file Jira or whatever for your requests. So.
Excellent.
Cool. Any other questions, actually? All right. Oh, sorry. Okay.
What is this visualization showing?
This right here, so somebody wrote basically to get a one-line result, wrote a giant Spark SQL query and submitted it. And so every single stage, every single light blue box in here is a stage that ran, a Spark stage. And all of the little tiny things in there that are really hard to see are the logical nodes of the logical plan that map onto those individual stages. Yeah, so that's their query represented.
So that leads to a follow-on. Have you tried this with the whole query code generation that kind of turns the volcano into a simple loop?
Sorry, say that again.
Okay, so you're familiar with in Spark 2.0, there's an optimization for turning. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this was primarily to address the problem that we had with Spark, and we were using Spark 1.5 on EMR. So it's a little bit old, and so that might be why some of the stuff that's currently in the Spark UI is outside of the realm of what I looked at. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Cool. Any other questions?